The story of an entitled mother who falsely claims Opie's house as her own and calls the cops on him, claiming Opie stole it and kicked her out of her own home after he kicked her out for not respecting his boundaries. Now entitled siblings who refuse to house their mother demand that Opie give her his house and send him to jail, accepting their mother's false accusations simply because she is a mother. They have now disowned him, but he is unconcerned as lockdowns begin in Germany. My mother approached me and told me that I should let her live in my house because, wait for it, I am your mother. So I let her move into the granny apartment. It has a separate entrance and includes 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room. She slept in the apartment's bedroom. She cooked her meals in the main kitchen but refused to cook shared meals, watched TV in the main living room, and generally behaved as if she owned the house. Any of my complaints were similarly dismissed. I am your mother. It all came to a head while I was working on a computer in my living room. There was a lull while the system setup was taking place, so I went to the kitchen to make tea and eat a snack. During this time, my mother went to the living room to watch television. But I was listening to Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, so she started pulling power plugs in an attempt to turn off the music. One of the first plugs she pulled was the computer I was working on when I returned from the kitchen. She denied any responsibility for it. She blamed me for having to turn off the music to watch TV. So why would she feel free to turn off the music in my house? Not to mention that I had to restart the system setup. Well, because I'm your mother, I countered. And my mother is a guest in my home. So, until you behave like a guest, you should return to your apartment. She disliked being treated that way. Well, she went to her apartment and then left. I went to the hardware store and purchased new locks. Until then, the keys to the main door also worked on the apartment door, and vice versa. There was no lock on the inside door connecting the apartment to the main house, so, yes, I did lock her out of the main area of the house. And then the phone call began. First, I suggested that my brother take her into the house he lives in alone, which is even larger than mine. My older sister, who has 2 spare rooms in her and her husband's condo since her children moved out a long time ago, objected to the suggestion that she take in our mother as well. My sister's daughter was surprised when I told her that the house belongs to me, not her grandmother. Her brother only called to confirm this with me. My brother's son was on my side, but he warned me that my mother was planning something. So, a few days later, while running errands, I received a call from the hardware store where I purchased the new locks. They informed me that the police had asked them to send someone to open the house. What did my mother do? She called the police because her son had locked her out of her home. When the officers at my house confronted me about it, I simply told them to try her key at the side door. Obviously, they hadn't done this before. Then they demanded proof that I actually owned the house. Strangely, the copies of the deed that I had at home were nowhere to be found. So I contacted my attorney, who dispatched one of his partners with new copies. He also brought eviction papers and asked me to consider them. I just asked for a pen. A few days later, my mother and brother moved in together. Her brother, older sister, and husband helped her with her belongings. Brother made one last effort to persuade me to change my mind. My sister simply treated me with contempt. My brother-in-law told me quietly he refused to let our mother move in with them before my sister even suggested it. But this is not the end of it. Police officers are pursuing charges for falsely reporting a crime. I locked her out. Everyone, including his younger brother, has called to ask me to drop the charges. I didn't press them in the first place. I can't tell the cops that everything is just a misunderstanding, or put in a good word for her. Why? Of course, because she's your mother. Edit. Thank you, everyone. When a friend suggested I post on Reddit, I expected it to garner as much attention as my late YouTube channel. To answer some of the questions raised in the comments, the response and support have been truly overwhelming. I'm 45 years old and the youngest of 4 siblings aged 47, 54, and 60. I quote never married, but I've had some long-term relationships. My mother, 78, lived in my home for about a year. I'm not sure when she moved in, but it was after my birthday, in April. The incident occurred on May 19th, almost 3 weeks ago. According to what I've heard, she is now occupying my nephew's old bedroom. I haven't heard any complaints from my brother so far, but I haven't heard anything from him or my older sister since they came to get our mother's belongings. The copies of the missing deed are public records. Anyone can go to City Hall, pay the fee, and get copies for themselves. Whatever she tried, she'd have to follow certain procedures. Keep this in mind. In addition, my attorney is ensuring that no harm comes to me or my property as a result of the criminal charges. She'll most likely receive a fine of around 500 euros. Should she refuse to pay the fine, it will go to court. Even so, it is unlikely that she will go to prison, but it will be significantly more expensive for her. Update. My mother was introduced in this post. As I previously stated, she is good. For additional stories. Here's one. This happened in a Friday class when I was in 8th or 9th grade, from 1988 to 1980, 9 or 80, 9 to 90. Our math teacher, let's call him Mr. Math for this, told us a story that allegedly dates back to the invention of the chess game. You quote V probably heard about it. The king asked the inventor of the chess game how he wanted to be compensated for his services. He stated that you should start with a single grain of rice on the first square of the board, then 2 grains on the second square, 4 grains on the third square, and so on until you reach the last square. The king did not realize how large the number would become. Agreed. So, how many grains of rice did the guy do? That was our weekend homework. Mr. Math let us use calculators and even home computers. Of course, back then, no calculator could provide more than 12 significant digits, and it didn't get any better with home computers, at least out of the box. More on that later. So, when my mother arrived home from work, she found me at the kitchen table with a notebook, the paper kind. Some of you may recall them doing calculations in longhand. After observing me for a few minutes, my mother said she could do it faster. In lieu of a reply, I ripped half of the notebook pages and placed them in a pen on her table. She accepted the challenge, but she had no idea that I had already made 3 attempts in the past. I spotted errors after I had gone several lines past them. This time, I performed 2 sets of calculations side by side, comparing the results to prevent errors from occurring again. That's why my progress seemed to be slow. I was about 60 squares in when she got to square 64. She smirked at me as she made herself a cup of coffee. Until that point, I was certain that her faster speed would result in errors that I hoped to avoid using my double-checking method. Later, we discovered that was the case, but for now, she had the numbers for all 64 squares. But how many grains of rice are in total? To get that number, you must add all 64 numbers calculated thus far. Then you're thinking, just like my mother, who went ahead and did exactly that. Now, this riddle is all about the power of 2, and I already knew that all I needed to do was double the last number and subtract 1. After all, this is how binary numbers are calculated, so that's what I did. So, of course, I finished first, and by a larger margin than my head start had been when my mother asked how I did it. I explained to her that the sum of all numbers up to a line equals the number on the following line minus 1. It was simple enough to prove what my mother called cheating, and she grounded me for a week. Also, our results did not match, so she claimed I couldn't even get it right. Confined to my room, I turned on my computer and wrote a simple program that went past the digit limit. It took less time than performing the calculations by hand. I can provide an example if anyone is interested. The results confirmed my calculations. On Monday, I turned in my handwritten sheets and a printout of the numbers from my basic program to Mr. Math's class. I also handed Mr. Math a printout of the program code. Over half of the class had sheets from parents or siblings in addition to their own, but less than a quarter had completed them, and half of those had incorrect results. Oddly enough, Mr. Math was still pleased with the outcome. Update. The entitled parent in this story is my brother, who also appears in my other story. At the age of 15, I began an apprenticeship as a junior metal worker specializing in thin sheet metal. Around the same time, my brother purchased a house with a large garden. One day, while visiting my nephew, who was approaching his 8th birthday, we discussed installing a garden railway. 2 of my trade school classmates worked for the company that produced those, so I asked if they could help. As it happened, I paid around $100 in today's money, and they said they'd see what they could do. A week or 2 later, they had brought my nephew's birthday present. A large cardboard box containing 50-plus tracks, switches, a couple station buildings, and some rolling stock. In fact, the box was so large that it barely fit into the guy's hands. One of the older apprentices at the same company. Hatchback automobile. My brother's house was only a few minutes from the school, so he offered to take it there. When we arrived, no one was home, so we climbed over the back fence and placed the box on the garden swing, which had a canvas cover. That evening, my brother called, and all he said was, "You should have called ahead." No thank you at all. When I arrived a few days later, my nephew was overjoyed with his gift. He never thanked me either. I believe my brother might have forbid him from doing so. Instead, he expressed his gratitude by being attentive and bringing me drinks and snacks from the kitchen. My sister-in-law never said thank you either, and it's probably for the same reason. However, as a stay-at-home mother, she was responsible for the garden. She enjoyed putting up the garden railway and arranging the flower beds so that the trains could pass through them. Even months later, when one of his co-workers inquired about where he got all of his railway supplies, I explained how I got them. My brother started harping again about how I should have called ahead and blah blah blah. Looking back, I believe my brother was jealous because his younger brother gave his son a gift that he valued more than anything my brother had given him. Edit fixed a formatting error. Sorry for the delay in posting this update, but it's finally here. My mother disowned and disinherited me. I don't care about the practical implications of that, but it still hurts. My brother called me last week to inform me that our mother has requested that I pay her fine and notify all interested parties that I have done so. Then it will be up to a court to decide who is at fault. However, before that happens, my brother will pay in her name to settle the legal matter. Meanwhile, my nephew fell out with my brother. The story behind it is not mine to tell, but I believe I can say that nephew's taking my side in this did not benefit him. On a more positive note, he plans to buy my neighbor's house. My former sister-in-law and her parents will contribute to the down payment. They came by last weekend to take a look before deciding to commit. If everything goes according to plan, he will be able to move in this fall. About the mess. They stated that if my family wants to kick me out, they are more than willing to adopt me into their family. After what I did for their only grandson, I could add a few more details, which I may do in the comments section, but these are the key points, all wrapped up. Or so I hope. Second story. My best friend attempted to replace me by stealing my husband and baby, forcing my baby to call her mama and forcibly kissing my husband. I assumed my husband was having an affair with my best friend when there was none on his end. I now regret everything. I am 28, have been with my 27-year-old husband for 6 years, married for 4 years, and we have 2 children, 3F and nearly 1/2. Everything about our relationship works perfectly for us. I couldn't have asked for a better husband and father for our children. I am completely in love with him, and his actions and words have consistently demonstrated that he feels the same way. There is no better feeling than falling asleep in his arms every night. Last weekend, my husband and I had some friends over for a barbecue. As the food neared readiness, we were all outside in the backyard, surrounding my husband on the grill. We all started sitting around our backyard table. When the food was ready and on the table, my husband went inside to use the restroom and get another case of beer. I hadn't realized my best friend, 28F, had followed him back out. My best friend hid behind the wall that separates our kitchen and living room, then surprised him by pulling him in and forcing a kiss. My husband immediately pushed her back and yelled, "WTF!" She burst into tears and ran out of the house. My husband returned to the backyard and asked to speak with me privately. He immediately told me what had happened. I was taken aback and assured him that everything would be fine and that we could talk after everyone else had left. I managed to keep up appearances for the next few hours, but I was emotionally distraught when everyone left. My husband sat me down, explained what had happened, and showed me the footage from our living room camera. It was exactly as my husband described, my 10-year best friend. After my 3rd date with my husband, the person I considered my literal sister forcibly kissed him. I told her that I was going to marry him. She understands how much I love him and how strong our relationship is. Nonetheless, she chose to try to find a middle ground. Our 3-year-old calls her auntie. My best friend tried to show up the next day just to talk, and my husband had to stop me from beating the shit out of her, so he kicked her out and told her not to return. It's been nearly a week, and I'm still nowhere near ready to move on. I absolutely do not blame my husband. He is completely innocent in this situation, and if anything, he is the victim. I've been lying on my husband's chest every day and night, crying. I'm angry and frustrated, and I don't know what to do. My husband has been wonderful, and as always, he just gets it and understands how I feel. He has brought me flowers almost every day and prepared my favorite meals several times in the last few days. I love and appreciate him even more for it. I'm not sure how I'll move on and trust any of my friends again after this update. After reading many of the comments, I realized that my husband could be having an affair with my best friend, and that he was aware of the camera and acted accordingly to ensure that I did not suspect an affair or crying as she left the house, my husband showing me the footage before I asked, and his love bombing would all make sense if he was cheating with my best friend. I couldn't be with a cheater, so I made sure my husband was loyal to me. On a side note, I checked to see if my husband was okay after being forcibly kissed, and he said he was fine, did not feel assaulted, and it was only a kiss. He explained that he was only concerned about me because he knew how much this friendship meant to me over the weekend. I checked my husband's phone and laptop while he was doing yard work. Both of us have full access to each other's phones, and I found nothing unusual on my husband's phone. I checked his messages, WhatsApp, social media, and the deleted messages folder. There was nothing suspicious about his phone or laptop. This morning, after my husband left for work, I asked our next-door neighbors, a friendly elderly couple, to watch the girls for a few hours, and I went to my best friend's house without telling her I was coming. She works the afternoon shift, so I knew she'd be there in the morning. She let me in, and she appeared scared, so I demanded to know the truth. She stated that she had always been very attracted to my husband and had tried to make advances before, but my husband had always turned her down. She admitted to being envious of me and my idyllic life with my husband. I should have noticed the signs when our firstborn began to speak. When my best friend held our daughter for the first time, she would always ask her to call her mama. She accidentally sat on my husband's lap. She's been trying to replace me for years, and I've never noticed. And my husband kept turning down her advances because he only wanted me. She admitted that she had drank more than she should have at the barbecue and decided to try her luck when she noticed my husband was going inside alone. I made her show her phone as well. Again, there was nothing implying an affair, and all of the messages appeared to be consistent with my husband's phone, so I knew nothing had been deleted or manipulated. She apologized profusely and asked that we not end our friendship over this. I told her she was nothing to me, that she could have been happy for me, and that I had treated her like a sister all these years only for her to try to take my life. Now I know for certain that my husband never cheated. The guilt of doubting him is eating me up. If I tell him I snooped through his phone and laptop and met with my ex-best friend to ensure he wasn't cheating, it will have an impact on our marriage, and he will be extremely disappointed in me for failing to trust him. And if I don't tell him, he'll lose trust in me. The guilt will continue to eat me up. I've never lied or kept secrets from him before, and I don't want to start now, but it's an impossible decision. He has always shown me how much he loves and cherishes me, and he does not deserve to be betrayed like this. I quote, "I'll provide more updates once I tell him the truth." Update. I told my husband that I'd looked through his phone and laptop and confronted an ex-best friend. I showed him both Reddit posts and explained that even the few comments speculating that he was having an affair made me paranoid, and I acted on it. I apologized to him for doubting him and thanked him for always being an amazing husband, refusing her advances and spoiling me, especially when I was down. He stated that he understands and that he should have informed me earlier about her trying her luck. I'm also starting therapy next week to work through my paranoia and trust issues. Process. The end of my friendship, and in general, trying to get into a better mental state so that I can be a better wife and mother. Third story, Mill ruined my wedding day, and my boyfriend took his mother's side and ignored me, causing me to cry. Everyone now accuses me of overreacting. I am 35 years old and recently married my 41-year-old husband. We both disliked being in the spotlight, so we decided on a low-key event. The only thing I was certain about was that I did not want photographs. My self-esteem is low. In the last 18 months, I have gained weight. I don't want to make excuses, but there are some reasons why. In the last 18 months, I have lost both my parents and grandmother. I quote, "We lost 2 jobs and experienced a miscarriage. Depression has hit me hard at times, and I've been eating for comfort. I was prescribed a new medication, and weight gain is a side effect. About a year ago, I severely broke my left ankle. I've had 3 surgeries to date. The last one occurred 10 days before the wedding. I cannot walk without pain. I didn't want photos that reminded me of how fat I am now. A few weeks before the wedding, my mother-in-law mentions going to a local beauty spot for photos. I say, no thank you. And yes, I'm being serious. My husband hears this. Later that night, I say again, I don't want photos. He says that's fine with him. The week before the wedding, I'm having the same conversation with Mel and my husband. Day of the wedding. My Phil and Mel pick us up. I can no longer drive because I am unable to move my ankle. We finish the legal shindig, and as we return to the car, Milligan suggests we go to the beauty spot for photos. I say no again, but she tells Phil to drive there, while my husband sits there. I know I gave him a look, but there was no response. Long story short, the photos are taken, and we get back in the car to drive home. My mother begins showing me the photos, and I hate myself in them. I look like a pile of finished goods. I look ridiculous in a dress with a medical boot, and I can't stop the tears from falling down my cheeks. This upsets my mother-in-law, and the atmosphere remains the rest of the day. I tried to move on, but I needed to get out of that stupid dress. I really just wanted to hide away privately. I told my husband that he and his mother ruined our wedding day for me because all I could think about were those photos. He said he had no idea I was so serious about no photos, that they were only for his mother to keep, and that he thought I looked lovely. I told him that not even 30 minutes into our marriage. He completely let me down, and I'm not sure if I'm more hurt or angry. He said I was being ridiculous and had let him down by making such a big deal over something that was a normal part of weddings. He also claimed I had hurt his mother. She has some mental health issues and has been obsessing over me crying on my wedding day, and I need to reassure her that she did nothing wrong. I told him no, and there would be serious consequences if he tried to tell her otherwise. Because, as far as I am concerned, they both completely ignored my single request, which was unacceptable. He thinks I am being completely unreasonable. So I'm responding to some of the OP's comments on Reddit. What if he wanted photographs? During our pre-wedding conversations, he repeatedly stated that he was fine with no photos. I have to believe everything he says, and I made a mistake by allowing them to take the photos. I tried not to cry in the car after attempting to move on with my day. I attempted to make everyone happy despite the fact that I am not. Commenter info. Did you really want to marry? It sounds like you despised the whole thing and forced yourself. Why OP? We both agreed that we wanted a marriage, not a wedding. We wanted a pleasant day without all the fanfare and expectations. Many updates from the OP and comments. I was prepared to be told that I was being unreasonable about photos. But being told that I shouldn't have married by so many people has crushed me. We've been together for 9 years, and we're planning this wedding long before my life fell apart. We quote, "We've been through a lot, and I love him and his family very much. This is the first time something like this has occurred. We both wanted to get married, and it would always be a small courthouse ceremony. We both agreed that weddings were silly events, and we didn't want to make a fuss. We talked, we discussed everything, and, as far as I knew, reached an agreement on everything. He never mentioned wanting photos, either before, during, or after. He has only told me that he does not care about having them. If everyone is saying something about his day, is it correct? How was I to know if he never sent all of the information I requested? He had told me he was pleased. I hoped we could have a good day and find happiness in the midst of so much darkness. I just received one request for the day. Are we not allowed to try to create happiness because I am broken? I wanted to make everyone happy, so I tried, despite how I felt after the legal issues in the photos. I spent the rest of the day entertaining the family, getting tea and coffee, and preparing dinner for everyone in an effort to make the day enjoyable. I wished for a happy day. I just did not want to be in the spotlight. I did not believe I needed to be in order to marry. OP describes some of her grief. Thank you. My parents were difficult. They both had issues that led to their deaths, and it seems like that has exacerbated the grief. I do not know. I've now lost every biologically connected person to me, which has caused a lot of emotions. I eat too much. Yes, this is comfort eating. However, before I broke my ankle, I was a marathon runner. I'd easily cover more than 70 kilometers a week. I'm used to fueling my body, not restricting it. I've never had to think before. Add in the quality of food lost from home cooking to more takeout, convenience, and medication-induced weight gain, and I'm not sure I stood a chance. The top comments on this post are underscored as 1 and 0, as well as 3 Zs. Why did you get out of your car at the beauty spot? I would have sat there until everybody gave up. MTA Bulldozer Mill deserves all of her negative feelings. She messed up, putting her selfish desires ahead of the bride's. Apprehensive. Underscore 19612. Why did you get married now? What was the pressing issue? You don't seem excited about getting married. It sounds like you're dealing with depression in addition to your physical health issues. So why marry in an unflattering dress and a surgical boot? 10 days following surgery? Is that why you didn't want pictures? Because you did not want to marry. The OP has been voted in, but the comments are very mixed. Update the same post the next day, with all of the comments claiming that I ignored my husband's wishes on his wedding day. I asked him directly if he wanted those photos, and he simply said no to appease me before you all pile on again. There is no reason why he would not respond truthfully. He said he didn't care about the photos Mitchell took in the woods. He stated that he has seen them, and they are objectively bad. He clarified that the photo was taken with a poor phone. It was not something he wanted to keep, and it was not worth the emotional distress. He stated that the only photo he would want was of my face staring up at him when we mentioned that the eye does. He joked that he should have strapped a GoPro to his forehead to capture the moment, but he doesn't need a picture to remember it. I wouldn't have opposed that idea because it would have been private between just us. He cannot explain why he is silent in the car. Mitchell has a severe mental disorder, and I believe there is fear of sending her into a downward spiral. I explained that I felt ambushed and that I only got out of the car to try to maintain peace. That really bothered him. He apologized for not speaking up. I believe he understands the main issues of not being supported and feeling helpless. Everyone says I should not have gotten out. I'm sure you'd call me the R for throwing a childish tantrum and refusing to get out of the car. If I posted that scenario, I was in a losing situation. I apologized for allowing my insecurities to affect our marriage. He hadn't realized how deep my problems were. I'm guilty of putting on a brave face, so I don't blame him. We do not want any drama. I will not hold a grudge against Mel. This is the first time such an issue has arisen in our family. Husband will talk with her, but not about my insecurities. He suggested that she delete the photos, but I told him that we both knew he would have to die on that hill. We're going to get past this. However, I'm not sure what to do if she makes them public. We both agree that what matters is our 9-year relationship, which has now become a marriage, rather than the day some papers were signed. I am sure that comment will irritate many people who believe that a wedding day should be a magical, life-changing experience. But that is how we see our lives together. Nothing to do with your emotions. I would not put our relationship or marriage on hold because times are tough. So, why would I put this one day off? We are not Americans, so marriage is not a big deal here. Many couples do not marry, which is completely normal given what happened before. Our primary reason for getting married was so that I could legally use his protected surname. This is why we recently went to the registry office, where there were 8 people in attendance. I apologize for using fatphobic language. Growing up in the 1990s, with a mother who worked in advertising has undoubtedly influenced how I perceive bodies, and I need to work on it. I've had counseling for my feelings about my loss of mobility, which has naturally impacted the other issues in my life. However, I plan to speak with my doctor about more specialized grief counseling in the future. Some of the OP's comments. Another thought from OP about why she wanted to marry. I provided an update, but to give you a more complete answer, I wanted to be a family with him. I could only legally use his protected surname if I married him or persuaded everyone in the country with that surname to let me use his name. I have lost my entire biological family. I want society, law, and history. I don't know how to recognize my family, which consists of my husband, me, and the dogs. I've lost my mobility and freedom by being unable to walk or drive, let alone run, which was my hobby. I have to rely so much on others now, whereas I used to be the one people relied on. Why should I give up the day I plan to marry? My grandmother's birthday? KM, why is his surname protected? What does this mean? The OP mentions that it is uncommon, so in order to use the name, you must first marry into it. Commenter, this is difficult for me to decide because you have the right to say no to the pictures, but pictures aren't necessarily for you. My brother did not like having pictures taken of him very often. He is now dead. I'd love to have more photos. I get very excited when I find one with him in the background. Same with one of my grandmothers. Pictures are intended for others rather than ourselves. I've learned that when someone asks for a picture of me, I almost always say yes. Now. OP. I see your point, but these are low-quality photos that were not intended for my mother-in-law, as she waved them in front of my face in the car moments after they were taken. After saying no 3 times, I began to cry. People seemed to think I threw a fit, but I just sat there, desperately trying to stop the tears in my eyes. I did nothing else. I couldn't do anything else at that point. Editor's note: many of OP's comments were in response to people telling her that she should have asked her husband, that her husband was lying, or that she ignored his wishes. I didn't include all of them because they became repetitive and frustrating.